In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Dear brothers and sisters, today we continue. We're at the halfway point of a sermon series that we've been having for all the Sundays of December. We've been looking through what's called the Patrimonial Passions, what we may know better as the deadly sins. And the third one that we're looking at this week is that's called greed. And this one it comes intentionally in a series. So the first one that we looked at 2 weeks ago was on gluttony. The second one that we looked at last week was on unchastity, what we more commonly know of as lust. And today's is on greed. We know from the last 2 weeks that the terms are much broader than we accept them for, that we normally think of them about in the way that we use English today. That gluttony isn't just about food, it's about all sorts of things. It's about wanting more and more and more. And likewise, unchastity is much more about unchecked desire than about any specific thing that we may naturally think of. Greed doesn't have quite the same malleability. So greed takes on the conventional definition, I suppose, where we're wanting more and more things. This is where it's distinct from gluttony, which is to want more and more of a thing, where taking an entire barbecue plate when a single dinner plate would do, and so on. Whereas gluttony, you're wanting the barbecue, but you're also wanting the trampoline in the backyard and the house that's around it. You're wanting all the things. And so there's the difference between gluttony and greed. Greed is the one that we're looking into today. This is a passion where the problem about it is that it's seeking to destroy contentment. It's seeking to destroy us being at peace with where we're at. Where instead of being happy with what God has given us, being content and fulfilled with what God has given us, instead we look to the Joneses, we look to the Kardashians, and we do our very, very best to try to keep up. And there's just not enough. And the reality with any of these passions is that they are trying to fill a hole that only one can fill. That only God can fill. Only divinity is good enough for this hole in our heart. Doesn't matter how many things or how much of a things. Only divinity will satisfy that wanted, that craving in our hearts. And so from greed, from that desire for a little more or for a lot more than we need and more than we should reasonably want, from there, it's only a couple of steps away from our ambition and our drive, taking us away from the present, taking us to be always looking into a future where there's more, where our ambition and drive can lead us from the very salvation that we could be attaining at this moment. And so, how is it that we fight against this? Just like with any sin, the first mistake is to think that we ourselves are fighting against it. That's the first mistake. Even to say, I wish to offer my struggle to God is already a mistake. It already presumes that we can win if only we tried harder, if only we exerted ourselves a bit more. And it is true that maybe we do need to exert ourselves. However, we cannot win this fight alone. We cannot win any of the fights against the passions alone. We need a little more humility than that. We need a little more reality than that. And so the first step is to ask God's help. Instead of saying, I can cope, I can manage, to instead ask Him to help us cope and manage, yes. But first we ask Him, and then we act. What kind of actions are there that we can bring to God for His blessing? And when we look at how we combat the passions, there are a few. there's a few tangible things that we can put into practice. The first of these is to have compassion on those who are without. It's all too often that we will say, walk past. Perhaps we'll be in the inner city where this may be more common. And we'll walk past and we'll look at someone who is without. Perhaps without home, perhaps without possessions, perhaps whatever. They're without something that we consider ourselves to have. What's the thing that we do? We don't normally interact with them at all. Not negatively, not positively, except maybe to avert our eyes and keep on going our way. But to have compassion, it's challenging. And it's in challenges that we grow. So to look to someone, to look them in the eye and treat them as a person. Not as that one without, but as a person, a child of God, an icon of Christ. This is one of the methods that we can use to help ourselves gain perspective. That really, do we need that thing? Do we need all those things in our wardrobe? Do we really need all those things in our cupboards? Maybe we can reconsider whether we need to hold on to them. The second way is by looking to those cupboards and wardrobes and actually giving. Perhaps to a charitable cause, perhaps to someone that we know could really use it, perhaps just getting them out of our lives. Whatever the case, to really look at ourselves, to really look at the things that we have and go, do I really need that? Or could someone else benefit? Could someone else benefit from my excess? We're not even getting to sacrificial giving today. Can someone benefit from my excess? If we haven't used this thing in a year, then we should be thinking about perhaps someone else would use this not just every year, perhaps that person would use it every week, every day even. What is it that we can skim off the top and not even affect our lives, but that will be the beginning of our struggle against this captivity to possessions that is the passion of greed. And the third method, different methods will be a good starting point for different people, but the third method that I put before you is that of stewardship. And this is a philosophy of how to look at our possessions. This is a philosophy of how to look at our possessions as being not one of ownership. If we own something, then it's ours what we do with it, and no one has any place to tell us what we should be doing with it. But we don't believe that we have this kind of ownership, not in a cosmic and eternal sense. The ownership that we have is titular. What it actually is stewardship, where we have these things and we have a responsibility for these things. We'll be called to account eventually for how do we use all the things that God gave us. Whether that's money, as stewardship is often used, or whether it's the things that we were given, whether it's the time that we were given, the talents that we were given, the abilities that we were given. We're going to be called on for each one of these. And so, did we do the best that we could with the things that were given to us? And we're able to look to ourselves for this. There's very few people who would have the authority, let alone the audacity, to be able to call someone else to account. So we can do this for ourselves, to look honestly, say, what should we do? What should we do with what we have been given? And so with these three methods of stewardship of time and of compassion for the poor and of looking to give away our excess and starting with there, starting with looking to give away our excess. Through these three things, may we be brought closer to Christ, may we be held to God's standard and God's benevolence, and may we follow Christ as the one who provides us with that pearl of great price. That as we heard here in the gospel, that the wise merchant would sell everything in order to obtain this pearl of heaven. Amen. The blessing of the Lord be upon you through his grace.